Oh, hey, what's going on, my fellow fart knockers and dillweeds? Welcome to another episode of the Gen X Locker. It's your host, Ant Master 5, me, coming at you from, as always, 8 feet underground, somewhere at the base of the Catskill Mountains. He's no good to me dead. The Empire will compensate you if he dies. Why did I say compensate with an English accent? I was gonna say speaking of Star Wars, but no, that's not gonna work. Well, speaking of Star Wars, being I have a Star Wars esque tattoo on my back, you're not seeing it because I look like Chewbacca without a shirt. Uh, tattoos, tattoos. You know, skin pictures. Yeah. Welcome to today's episode. I'm calling it the Gen X Tattoo Experience. The Gen X Tattoo. Tattoos of Gen X. What are they? What were they? Do they still exist? Well, let's dive right in, shall we? So, back in the day, back in the day, I have a collection of some body art, and I always felt that when I was a kid growing up, it was like I don't know, it was I didn't come from like a tattoo esque family, you know. I didn't have any older uncles or anything like that with tattoos and or female relatives. Nobody had a tattoo. It just wasn't a thing. I don't know why. It just, I don't know, just because of, my upbringing and how, most of my extended family is cousins and everything, but it just I don't know, it was just not a thing. But you start to get ideas when you're growing up. As I've always said, my brother was 10 years older than me, born in 1965. And when he was probably about 20, 21, he got his first tattoo. So I remember I was about 10 or 11 when it happened, when he did it. And it was kind of typical of a 1980s esque, if you will, tattoo. It was a he got it really high up on his shoulder. He was hiding it from our from our dad, and it was like a wildlife scene. It was like a big grizzly bear on a rock with his paw turned, like he was gonna hook a salmon out of the river. He was by a river, and there was like trees and mountains behind him. That was it, and I was probably like like yay big. I mean, it like kind of covered almost the top right right here of his shoulder, if you will. And I don't remember. I really don't remember the big screaming deal. Like if my dad ever saw it or how that. Maybe I just wasn't home when that happened. But I do know my dad wanted nothing to do with any of us having a tattoo. So the episode today is going to be in kind of two parts. I'm going to tell you about my first tattoo experience, and then we're going to talk about the tattoos of the generation, the tattoos of Gen X. So when I was like, I guess on the cusp of turning 18, I don't know why. I just felt that, it was the 90s, and I felt, I don't know, it was like, it, I'm going to get a tattoo. It's kind of like a rite of passage. That's just how I felt. I just felt like I got to do this, because I knew my brother did it. So, most of the things my brother did, I tried to follow suit, with the exception of a lot of the outdoor danger that he was into. I wasn't really into like riding my snowmobile on ice that's paper thin. So the idea was planted in my brain. Planted in my brain. I did I almost said Seals and Crofts. Simon and Garfunkel, you twit. I'm enjoying a strawberry smoothie with no additives. It's very healthy, actually. So let's see. Where am I? Oh, so I knew this was a no go with dad. This wasn't going to happen. Dad was like, he wasn't new, N-E-W, new. There wasn't even approaching my dad with a tattoo, which was really weird because let me explain something about my dad. My dad was into zero body modifications. Like, no guy was going to have an earring, especially one of his sons. and or a tattoo. But he had no problem with dudes with long hair. Truth. Now, my dad is going to be 87 and he still has a huge ponytail for those of you that know him. So when I was about 18, I started growing my hair just to see if I could do it. I really couldn't because I have this like thick mop. So all it does is get thick and then kind of long and wavy in the back. You see where it's going, right? All business up front, party, the mullet. Yeah, I totally had a mullet, but I had a big mullet. I had, really long hair in my late teens. My dad had absolutely no problem with it. I remember kind of hinting that I wanted to get an earring. Ooh. And I kind of wanted to use a disclaimer that, well, hey, I have long hair. And my dad's mentality, as I've told you, my dad's an immigrant. He was born and raised in Italy. He kind of gave me the you ain't getting no eating, not an earring, eating. And I'm like, oh, well, why? I have long hair. Okay, let me explain something to you. God make your hair grow, but God no put a hole in your head. But I could put a hole in your head. Okay, so yeah, he and I've seen my dad in confrontations with people, and I knew this is probably yeah. Don't test this one, Aunt. Don't no. So ixnay on the earring nay, but I really wanted a tattoo, and I was gonna get a tattoo. So I knew a tattoo artist actually that was in the town that I lived in with my parents in the Hudson Valley, and he went by the name of Shanghai Tattoo, Tom Shanghai McCoy, and my family was very close with the McCoy family. And so he was a shoe-in. He was the guy that was going to do my tattoo. He had a studio, and I knew people that had, his work done, and the guy did amazing work. So artist selected. I'm still going to get murdered by my father. So I did tell my mom, yeah, that went over like a fart in church. Actually, no, you know what? Not really. Excuse me, my mom being born and raised in the five boroughs, Bronx girl. My mom definitely had a way about her where she would, kind of stick a head in the sand. So it was like, Mom, I want to get a tattoo. I don't want to know nothing. I don't want to know nothing. But she didn't say no. So not long after my 18th birthday, I decided that I was going to get the Dark Side of the Moon. I wanted the album cover tattooed on my arm. That's what I wanted. It was a legendary album, and I know how I felt about it growing up, and I probably automatically knew how I would have felt about it in the future. It just, it's an album that always stood by me. So that's what I did. I selected the album, selected the art, and then then I bought some reading material. I bought this at a store called Media Play, which used to be in Middletown, New York. Tattoo: The Exotic Art of Skin Decoration. Comes with 7 free temporary tattoos inside by Michelle DeLeo. And, it was a great book. And oh shit. I didn't even know this. I made an inscription in it. Hang on. In honor of my dearly departed friend and tattooist, Tom Shanghai McCoy, who introduced me to the world of tattoos, may he rest in peace, knowing that I still show his art proudly on my skin and will continue my journey in the tattoo realm, observing, enjoying, and collecting. I almost got a little fucking misty. Yeah, Tom passed away in 2005, but he was my guy. So I bought this book, and I literally read it cover to cover within like 2 days because I was like, oh, God, I want to know all the ins and outs. And even though I knew people, other members of the McCoy family, my friend Danny and Lance and their other brother Bill, everybody had a tattoo, but I was like, well, just I want to do my research, So I remember reading that book and, is it going to hurt? It's like, because the McCoy brothers really weren't going to tell me. They were just going to be like, don't be a quieter boy. None of them have an Irish but that was their mentality. It's like, come on, just do it. So, I read the book, and it's a great book actually, and it deals with this girl's journey about getting her first tattoo, and then basically just about how the art evolved over the years. It was written in the 90s, so it's not very time friendly, but So made the decision, gonna go for it. Went to go see Shanghai at the studio. He was just cooler than anything, and made my appointment and went. I remember going to my appointment and telling my mom I'm going to the mall. Yeah, that's it. And very very nervous that morning. Waking up, and it was like, I mean, like I said, it's a rite of passage, and like the morning of your first tattoo is right up there with the morning of your you're taking your driver's test. It's like it's to that level. The morning of your first wedding. I don't know why I said first. So I went and went down there and Tom was really, I mean, really into old school classic rock, and he's playing Zeppelin and the Doors and Pink Floyd, and yeah, have a seat. I'm just finishing up your stencil. And off we go. We're off to the races. And he applies the stencil, and and like there's no turning back now. And go ahead and look in the mirror, and I'm looking. All right, it's good. The placement's good. Let me see it. Let me take a look. And Don was the type of guy where he's like, no, no. He grab some alcohol and put it on a a sterile 4x4, wash it all off. No, we're gonna do that again. I don't like the placement. Put the stencil on you again. Wiped it with a Menin speed stick. I always remember that. That's how he applied it. I forget what kind of ink was on the stencil, and it was like almost like on tracing paper. So when he would apply it, he would kind of like slap it to your skin, and then he would take that Menin speed stick deodorant and just kind of give it a paint the fence, Daniel son. That's a little that was the motion. And took it off and kind of okay, we'll go check the mirror. I think we're good. We're good. Do you like it? Because if you don't like it, let me know. No, no, I think we're good. All right. And sure enough, I sat in the chair. There's some things I'm probably going to say that I'm actually paraphrasing from this book because I read it so many times. And I remember like looking down the corner of my eye, seeing the power supply, that Tommy had with his foot, and it's kind of like clicking the tongs of the barbecue twice. I heard the like, here we go. All right, and Tom looked at me, a cigarette right out of his, hanging out of his mouth, and he'd go, all right, we're gonna do one line so you see how it feels. The actual line he did was this one. I always remember that was the first line. It was the middle one in the prism itself. And I heard that, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And I felt it, and it burned a little, it hurt a little, but was more annoying than painful. And he was like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Let's do it." So we went along with it, and about probably an hour and a half later, my piece was finished, and I was completely ecstatic. I was like, I mean, man, I walked out of that tattoo studio, and I was either talk about an endorphin rush. I mean, it's just like your adrenaline is through the roof. So you're either gonna have sex or you're gonna beat the shit out of somebody. I don't want to say both. But yeah, and so came home, and it was my as you could see, you really can't see it. My shirt covered it, so I was good to go. And then my dad didn't see it, because I was still living at home. My dad didn't see it, and my buddy Eddie, who does the Realms of Metal here on YouTube, and then his online store, the Realms of Rock. By the way, shouting out to props to him. He just got me that. Speaking of Floyd, where's my finger? The Division Bell figurines. Tell me that ain't the coolest shit in the world, right? Yeah. So Eddie went to get his first tattoo, and if I remember correctly, he wanted to hide it from his mom. Like I think his stepdad was pretty okay with it, but his mom was kind of like my mom, and maybe not as bad as my dad. But I remember how it started. I remember it was like before I kind of even told my mom. I remember being at Ed's house, and we were he just got his tattoo, and it was kind of high up on his bicep, and he was like, I want to tell my mom. And I think we were like up in his bedroom, like playing Sega. And I was like, I don't know, dude. Are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna tell my mom. I'm gonna tell my mom. So he came to the top of the stairs. Like I said, we were still both living at home. And he's like, hey mom. She's like, I can still hear her. She's like, what? Ah, come to the bottom of the steps for a minute. the ne- the next line out of Ed's mom's mouth was, "Did you get a tattoo?" Uh, maybe. So I was like, yeah, Ed's mom, isn't gonna, hit him with a shovel and bury him in the backyard in a shallow grave. My dad is. But, I kind of told my mom, and she just had her hands up. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. And, a couple of years went by. My dad still never saw it. I went and got 2 and 3 more, all on my upper arms. So, t-shirts would always cover them. And it wasn't until, like I said, probably like 2 years later. My parents own an Italian restaurant, and over the one summer, probably like I said, 2 years after the actual application of tattoo number one, and now I got 2 and 3. We had this kid that was getting a summer job, just doing dishes and prep cook stuff in the restaurant, and he happened to be the son of this lady that Shanghai was dating. So I want to say his name was Kyle. And if the McCoy family is watching, well, it might have been Kyle. And I remember like his first night at the restaurant. I don't know. It's been, it's been a couple of years now. So I kind of like forgot about it. Like I said, my dad still hasn't seen it. I only ran into one incident once where I remember like I was in the shower and I heard my dad upstairs and I'm like, oh, now I got to get from the bathroom to my room. What am I going to do? So, I didn't have a robe. There's towels everywhere, so I put obviously towel around my waist. And I'm like, grab a towel and throw it like across my shoulders. And it actually covered, the tattoos that I had. And, passing my dad in the hallway. Yes, yes, good day, sir. Yes, hello, hello. Yes, good morrow. Yes, fine, fine weather we're having. Yes, yes, of course. I'm gonna go in my room, slam the door. That was like the really only close call I had. It never came up. I mean, Shanghai would come into the restaurant to eat dinner. Any of the McCoy brothers would come in. Lance and Missy back in the day when they were still together. No, never came up. It never came up. Well, the McCoy family also knew that my dad would murder me. So it was, eventually dad's going to find out, but it's not going to be from any of us. So I'm outside on the back deck talking to Kyle, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, so you got a summer job here?" He's like, yeah, I'm saving up for a car, whatever, blah blah blah. Okay, cool, good to see you. And so I was working that night at the restaurant. I waited tables, I bartended the whole nine. So I'm doing like side work. We were just opening. I never forgot that. It was like a Friday or Saturday night. And I'm behind the bar. I'm cutting fruit and cutting lemons, limes, doing my thing, doing my, prep work before. It was like a half hour before we opened. And I guess my dad, saw me speaking with Kyle out on the back deck. And so my dad's in the kitchen and he's, cutting chicken and doing his thing and Kyle's over there and washing, pots and pans and stuff. And he just, very very nonchalant. My dad just goes, "Hey, how do you know my son?" Kyle just turns around and goes, "Oh, my mom's boyfriend did his tattoos." When we talked about movies on the last episode, we talked about Twister and we talked about something called the F5. So, wasn't that bad, right? So I didn't know what happened, but I heard the second part. And I'm still, like I said, I'm behind the bar, and then, there they are. My across from me, we had like a family table that my mom did bookwork on. And I see my dad come out of the kitchen, he's wiping his hands with a rag, and he just says to my mom who knew, "Let me ask you a question." That right there. Let me ask you a question. My mom over her reading glasses. What? You think he got that too? My mom. I don't know. So he walks over to me and he goes, "Hey, come over here. I'm busy. I'm putting beer in the fridge." It's like, I said, "Come over here." Oh shit. Yeah, his tone of voice just knew that I was going to be spitting teeth out in a couple of minutes. I go, "What?" He goes, "You got that too?" I said, "Well, what happens if I do? I don't believe you. And I said, well, I do. Let me see. I lifted up this sleeve. I showed him Dark Side of the Moon, and he kind of looked at it, kind of recognized it maybe from like a poster in my room, and was like, yeah, okay. I said, what do you mean, okay? Tattoo. And he just walked away. I didn't get killed. Over the years, he used to make comments that I drew my tattoos on with a magic marker. He'd knock on the bathroom door. What are you doing in there? Putting on your tattoos with a magic marker? I'm like, no, Dad. But that was my tattoo. That was my first tattoo experience. Didn't get me killed, didn't get me thrown out of the house. I wound up getting, several more. And then, after I moved out, I think I was like 24 or 25. So I was still at home a couple of years. That's when I finally decided that, I'll go below, the short sleeves and I'll get like, my forearms done and stuff like that. But that was how my journey began. But like I said, going into part 2 of the episode, it was, the Gen X tattoo, it really was. It was like, I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying nobody got tattooed, back in the day. I mean, people were, inking themselves in ancient times. But, during modern civilization, it seemed to, you know, getting a tattoo wasn't a rite of passage. And it was only kind of within a certain, genre of people. So like, you know, in in the 40s and 50s, it was basically the veterans, the GIs that were coming home from the war. And, they got what they called the Sailor Jerry-esque tattoos. The old Navy guys would get, the ship on their forearm with the banner that said homeward bound. The pinup girls, the hearts with mom. And that was, from, I guess, the history of it didn't really change a lot, and then like, in the 60s, into the 60s, into the 70s, of course, tattoos definitely became, predominantly known in the biker culture. Motorcycle clubs, it was pretty much a thing. You rode a Harley, you got a tattoo. And then the music world, the music world really, especially rock and roll, tattoos started to become a thing. But they really didn't become like a thing until, we had the media to go with it. MTV. Can I just wet my whistle? And I think, when it comes to seeing tattoos in music, of course, like, in the, rise of, punk and then metal, that's when I first started to see, especially bands. I mean, not that they're punk. I think Motley Crue was probably like one of the bands that they were so tattooed, they were so into tattoos. I think maybe that's where it kind of starts to, well, hey, the guys from Motley Crue have tattoos. I love Motley Crue. I want to get a tattoo. And then these guys, Guns N' Roses, it just became part of almost their, their shtick, if you will. It was like, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and tattoos. And, and then later on, as the years progressed, then you started to see, like bands like, the Red Hot Chili Peppers and, a lot of bands that I started to get into, and and especially Henry Rollins. I think Henry Rollins might have been the clincher. So I think that was a lot of the influence where, it started to just be cool. Yeah, it just started to become more mainstream and more socially acceptable. So you started to see very specific designs, especially within the 90s, like every Gen X guy that was probably born in the mid to late 70s, they all got, the quintessential tribal band on like their bicep. I mean, personally, I would have never done it, but moving right along, I think about this tattoo all the time. Now, it had zero meaning when Shanghai did it. I think I drew the design on loose leaf paper because I saw Anthony Kiedis had something similar, and I was like, I want this. But now that I think about it, it's it's such a battle flag of Gen X. That tattoo meant really nothing. It was just, I got another tattoo. Now it means something to me. Now it's literally symbolic of our generation, of my generation. It's symbolic of Gen X. And you saw a lot of that. And then you saw the barbed wire, around the bicep. Everybody wanted to be a tough guy and get the barbed wire. Um, and then color wise, you started to see, you saw the bright extreme colors and stuff like that. But if you didn't hold color well, depending on your skin pigment, then you started to see the black and gray, and that's what they called it, the basically the well, not black and white, but the black and gray, colorless tattoos that were just, black and shaded up with gray and stuff like that. And those became, a thing. And specific things that you would see, they like the tribal sun. I think Alice in Chains used it in some of their artwork. Godsmack used it in some of their artwork, and that showed up on, a lot of guys would put it on their forearm. Sometimes you would see it like on the stomach, and it was like you couldn't get away from it. It just became more and more a thing for the kids of Gen X that were definitely in that age bracket of, late teens to late 20s, right in that 10-year period. They were all running into the tattoo studios. And the tattoo studios back then, they were pretty much, it was kind of this bipartisan split. You had these old school guys that were still around that, did the Korean War vets that were still doing the Sailor Jerry-esque pieces. And then you had, like these guys from like the Sunset Strip Tattoo and, in California, that was all about these, bold tribal designs and brilliant colors. The Chinese symbols, that was another big thing. And I mean, now you're talking about the days before the internet. So it's like, you better know what the hell you're putting on there. And, be it Cantonese or, Mandarin, because, next thing you know, what you think is strength and honor, you're walking around with something that really says, sugar substitute. I took some notes here because I really want to touch base on a lot of these. The tribal sun, the barbed wire, the biomechanical designs. The biomechanical designs were everywhere, and they were the ones that cost money. Usually inspired by the artist H.R. Geiger. H.R. Geiger, the Swiss artist that designed the whole configuration of the Alien from the Alien movie franchise with Sigourney Weaver. So like these, very intricate designs with like spinal vertebrae and bones, but then, grafted with, like metal and, like titanium and, wiring and, very sleek and very, very fluid and very curvy. Emerson, Lake and Palmer actually used an H.R. Geiger artwork on their brain salad surgery. Do I have it right? I didn't Google it. Yeah. That's an H.R. Geiger thing. The death metal band Carcass used one of his sculptures. So you started to see that a lot in the tattoo world. People are like, oh, I'm going to get a Geiger-esque tattoo. And sometimes they would do these tattoos where they would do this technique where with, whip shading and shadows, it would make it like the illusion that the skin was opened up. And then you'd see all of these biomechanical servos and wiring and flux capacitors capacitating, in the arm, like within the wound. Very, very cool shit. In fact, Joey Allen, guitar player for the hair metal band Warrant, he had a great, great piece on, I want to say his, can't tell my left from my right. I want to say his left forearm. No, excuse me, his right forearm, because you could see it when he was playing guitar. And it was like one of these pieces where the skin looked like it was open and you saw like these pistons. It almost looked like they were moving. What else? What else? A lot of Gen Xers did the nautical star. That was everywhere. That was everywhere and everywhere. I still have friends that are rocking it. And like I remember working with a guy that had it kind of like back, like almost behind his arm, like above his elbow. That was a famous placement. And speaking of placement, a lot of guys influenced by Phil from Pantera started to get their bald heads tattooed. Like, Phil had strength tattooed on the side of his head. Not my bag, baby. And what else? Yeah, that just, I mean, you couldn't get away from it. You couldn't get away from how the tattoos were, and how they pretty much were very similar, to a lot of us. A lot of us were walking around with the tribal design, with the tribal sun, with the the nautical star, a lot of these things. And then of course, how many girls had the quintessential tramp stamp, how many guys, like had the tribal band. And then, it's funny. It was like after the turn of the century, after 2000 kind of hit, and once the millennials started to get the tattoo age worthy, that's when I noticed a little bit. Actually, I noticed, the big change. Then it just seemed that a lot of tattoo artists really started to think outside the box. And don't get me wrong, there was plenty back in the day, Paul Booth, that were definitely, Shotzi, that were definitely thinking outside the box. But suddenly, you had these intricate, what they call the fine line designs. And like, what I started to see a lot more of, like, you started to see less of the tramp stamp, but a little bit more, I don't want to say classy, because I'm not saying the tramp stamp is not classy. Relax. But a lot of females would get the clavicle tattoo. You start to see that. Then the Roman numeral, that came around a lot. You see that a lot today. And a lot of this art, a lot of it is back to this basic, definitely inspired by Gen X. A lot of it's black and gray. Not a lot of people are getting color anymore, which, I respect either way. And if I do see color, I work with a few girls that have, brilliant, daisies and sunflowers and, like, wow. Like, I mean, holy shit, that's bright. But then again, a lot of them are pale because, like me, they work overnights and they don't see the sun. The time, the timekeeping, what do they call the timekeeping thing? The clock. You see a lot of clocks, a lot of people get the clock tattooed on them, the time their son was born, the time their daughter was born, the time their dad passed away, their mom passed away. So you start to see a lot of these intricate designs with clocks and, clock faces, either in like a pocket watch, a grandfather clock. And you start to see a lot of that, I've noticed. But a lot of things have, I don't want to say replaced a lot of the Gen X-esque tattoos, but they've definitely evolved. I'm not saying nobody's going to get the Anthony Kiedis, inspired, tribal band around their bicep anymore. That was loud. Can I read that? Okay. But I should have put that on mute. I just got a small alert from my computer. Nothing's bad. But like I said, in the Gen X locker, we don't edit because editing's for wimps. But looking over my notes, I pretty much think yeah, that's about it. Oh, the Bible verse. That's a big thing. Yeah. I'm sorry. I kind of went, I took a trip down memory lane, and I remember, like, I'll always remember being, that kid, and here I am, a teenager in a tattoo studio. I'm of age. I can legally be here and getting my first tattoo. And it was something that, I have no regrets. No, zero regrets, especially getting my first tattoo. Are you going to cover that up one day? I don't know. No, I still love that album. I love Dark Side of the Moon. It's a landmark album. It's an album that I put on from beginning to end, and I love listening to it. So it's going to be right here, close to me heart. I don't know if that was Roger Waters or David Gilmour. So that about does it for this week's, whatever the hell you want to call it, episode. So let me know. Do you have a Gen X-esque tattoo? Do you have something completely different? I mean, do you have something from a science fiction movie like The Thing, which is a Gen X-esque type of movie? But do you have a tattoo of that? I may know a guy. Do you want to get more? Do you have any that you regret? Drop a comment. As always, you can always hit me up. I never say hit me up. You can always hit me up at the Gen X Locker at Outlook.com, all one word, all lowercase. And of course, on the Facebook, on the Instagram, where else are we? We could be in your backyard. You never know. So please also let me know. Anything you guys want to talk about? Anything you got any dudes, dudettes, fart knockers, and dillweeds. I got a whole, let me show you the cover of my book. I have a whole book. This is the Gen X Locker. This is the official Spiral Notebook. And this is loaded up with ideas, but there's always something that I don't think about. So if he was like, hey, Aunt, Master Five, what would make a great episode? And then you fill in the blank. So I'm all about it, man. We're all about the love. So until then, kids, be groovy to each other, and I will catch you very soon. Peace.